on this.
That's good eyesight.
Okay, so we're going to get started. This is the public safety webinar for drones. My name is Cody Burrington. I work at the Public Safety Training Center in Camdenton, Missouri. I am the training coordinator. We do the continuing education law enforcement training for officers that are in the field. I have my partners here from Aerobotics LLC, Rick and Amy Cassida. We started talking about 6 months ago and created these two courses, the public safety course and then also the Part 107 test prep course, to get the word out about using drones, how you can use them, where you can use them, who can use them for different types of, in different types of areas, firefighters, police, all types of public safety, security, private investigators. And then, so we developed two courses, and we just now started advertising them, and that's what we're here for. This webinar is to share a little information, and maybe it's something you know, maybe it's something you don't. If you have questions for us, just let us know, and I'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and get started. First up, we'll have Rick.
Just a minute here, we're having a little technical difficulty.
The space.
Click on the particle with the mouse. Yeah. There we go. Yes, it was in the wrong one.
Right. First off, I want to thank Cody and MSU for hosting us. My name's Rick Cassida, and I'm part of Aerobotics LLC. We're here to talk to you tonight about public safety and what drones, can do for public safety. So let's start out and just answer that question. Some of the things that drones can be used for in public safety. It's wide open on all the different uses for these. One of the big things that we've seen locally already in use has been crash scene investigation. The Missouri State Highway Patrol has already implemented UAVs in their infrastructure, and it's been very, very successful for them. It took them, they told me, over a year to get it implemented, but once they got it put in place, they were seeing times on the highway slow down on crash investigation, go from 3 and 4 hours where they were going out and using GPS models where they had to go out and position and mark each different point and location for later data analysis. And they would be able to take a drone, fly, gather these points within about 20 minutes time on a scene where they could then get MoDOT to go ahead and open the highway back up. And after they had this, they're using Pix 4D software. They're uploading and they're coming out with 3D models of the scene. And accuracy through their analysis has been accurate enough that it's been viable in court. It's been just as accurate. I don't want to say because I don't remember specifically, but it was extremely tight tolerance on how accurate it was. It was within a matter of inches that they were finding. So they were really pleased with their results. Some of the other uses that these are being used for, they're using thermal images and cameras like we've got on this unique model. By using this, you're picking up, if you guys have ever seen thermal imaging before, you're picking up more of a heat source than what you are actually the image itself. So by doing this, we're using a lot of these as far as night, or when people are getting lost out in the woods, especially, winter, that type of thing, conservation departments, so that it's much easier. They can find people instead of going out and sending people in these wagon wheel search patterns like they've did for years, and two-way radios. They're actually able to send these drones up and cover, several miles in a matter of minutes. And then once they do spot whatever their target is, the cameras on these, and for the pilot, will have, I don't want to say it's like a scope type, but it will have an area framework in the center of it to where they can zero in and focus camera on that frame. When they do that, the software will give them their GPS coordinates. Once they have that longitude and latitude, they can hand that out to their rescue team. Their rescue team can put it in their GPS, and they can walk straight to the person. They can find exactly where they're at. So as you can see, as far as life-saving, these things can be tremendous in that respect. One of the other ways these are being used are a lot is in inspections. Commercial inspections, I believe it was just a few years ago, they had some people that were fatally injured in a radio tower incidents where they had one collapse and they had some cables break they were unaware of were bad. A lot of these can be used to go out and inspect these radio towers. Wind turbines are a big one. They have to go out, they send these guys out to climb up looking for transmission leaks. And instead of doing that now, the cameras are good enough on these. They can go out, they can have one inspector go out, fly multiple turbine sites. If they see something they think's an issue, the cameras are high resolution enough that then they can send the team out and the guy climb up there to inspect it instead of constantly climbing up, and down these things, trying to look around, find out what's going on. Another big deal for these, big use, is for fire departments. They're using these whenever they have, say, a fire inside of an apartment building or a large building where a fire could be maybe more isolated on an inner part of the structure. They can fly above these with thermal imaging, and they can see hot spots on the roof. By setting the temperature range and the spectrum on these thermal cameras, they can focus in, and if they've got a place where they're about to have a burn through or they're having an issue, they can go through and find that before they have people head to that specific area. We had some statistics on it, and I don't have those with me tonight, but you can find them on the internet really easily. There's several fire departments around the country that's been using it, and it allowed them to concentrate their efforts in particular areas during a fire that otherwise they wouldn't have known was an area they should be focused on. Using these in hazmat situations is a big deal for spills. They can go around, they can actually get an overhead visual view of where the area of danger is before they start sending people into it. Law enforcement, we've already mentioned as far as crash inspection, but some areas are starting to use them in the surveillance area, and from the safety aspect, they can, if they, let's say they've got somebody that they're worried is a dangerous situation, or a person that may be hiding in, whatever the scenario may be, they can send this drone up instead of sending guys in the face of, danger, not knowing what's there. They can first fly these in the vicinity, get an overall view and a picture of what's going on. Where are these people at? What's going on with them before they send people in, and they can, narrow down their focus in an area which is good for public safety and their own safety. We're also seeing these things being used. Some places are actually implementing these for security. Instead of having security guards drive around, they're having people that are sending these things out on regular intervals from locations around large facilities or areas like that. They can view it. They can cut back, on dangers to somebody going out if somebody's trying to break in, know whether they need to call in other law enforcement for support. We're seeing these a lot in survey work. Survey and agriculture is another major area. We've talked to several surveyors that are getting ready to start implementing these because of the constraints they run into on a lot of property. The Ozarks is a good example, with rivers, lakes. a lot of the hills, trying to go out, climb up and down. They can get a geo-reference. They can set it. They can do their surveys in much shorter periods of time with just as much accuracy, less danger to themselves, climbing up and down through the rocks. Smokestack inspections. Again, same type thing. If they're older ones to where they might have to be tuck pointed, or they could have, stress cracks issues. Mechanical engineers are using these a lot for bridge inspections. They can actually go out on some of these bridges. They've got several of the UAVs that are set up with cameras. They'll be specialty models. They'll set them up on the top so they can fly, not only see the bridges from the side and the structure, but they can fly under the bridge, see the structure from up underneath without having a guy having to rappel or climb down over the side. Power lines and electrical is another big area for these, especially substations. Whenever you have, a substation that's got, say, 13,200 volts coming in at certain spots to it, everybody's heard transformers hum, and that hum literally can loosen the contacts where these cables and wires are connected on transformers and switch gear, and that creates what's called a hotspot. And hotspots, of course, are a danger for fire explosion on transformers. That's what happens a lot of times on substations when you hear about a transformer blowing. What they'll do is take these thermal drones or drones, and they can fly them around. They can set the heat spectrum for a particular heat range that they want to see. And then they can examine if those hot spots are, something's loosened up, they got a hot spot. They know before they send that guy in to work on that, where it's at and what it is. And the reason I'm somewhat familiar with this, years ago, I worked as an electrician for Mercy. And we used to go in and have to do a lot of inspections on substations and transformers. And I'm telling you, folks, that's scary. Whenever you walk in one of those with that much voltage and amperage, you can feel the hair on your arms raise. You don't want to be in there unless you have to be in there to do it. So these are really good for that. They also use these a lot for solar power inspections. Again, they're using the thermal for the same reason. They're able to see whenever they're having cell failure on panels. And if you're from around this area, you may have seen the big panel area out towards Nixon on Highway 14. Areas like that, this would simplify greatly, being able to see if those panels are functioning properly. I'm going to move on a little bit and talk a little bit about the equipment for the job, and that, everybody, is really that's a wide open topic. It really depends on what you're doing and what you're looking to get out of it. As far as a situation for me, we were talking a little earlier with the gentleman online. DJI has a very strong hold on the marketplace, and they make some really good quality equipment. I personally prefer unique products on their H520 because it's their commercial model and it doesn't have the lockdowns that DJI has. While DJI is a very good product, very good support for it, there's situations which we found the Missouri State Highway Patrol ran into to where there could be a lockdown. And they put a software lockdown where they had set their parameters for whatever their reasoning may be that locks that drone down to where until you get an authorization code from them, it's not going to fly. It's just not going to take off. And that's just not going to work in a lot of situations for public safety. One of the other issues with that I see with a lot of these is you need to be aware that unless you put your software, set it up in certain ways, every single thing you do with that drone can be automatically uploaded without your actual knowledge of it. And whenever that's uploaded in the cloud, you could be working for somebody that's a commercial client. They don't want this information uploaded. They don't want that up there. They want, their privacy, and you're hired to do diligence, give them their privacy. So that's another reason I steer towards these. As far as how they fly, I feel like one flies as good as the other. They're all set up on the same general structure. They all do a really good job for what their intended job is. I just like the idea of no lockdowns, I also like the price point of these. You can get into these, you can investigate yourselves online, but you can get into these for up to 50% less and get the exact same thing and the same performance that you can get as having to go with higher end, where you can get up with a low end thermal. In some of the other brands, you'll go up to 15,000. You can see this at a third of that. So that's my deal on these. That's why I go with them. But that aside, one of the other things that we've got on setups like this is, and you can get this on any of the UAVs that are out there, this has a low light level camera. This has 2 cameras in the thermal and a low light. The nice thing about the low light is some search and rescue, there's going to be times when really thermal's not your answer. It's not going to work as well for you. And that's if, say, you're in the absolute hottest part of August, depending on how you set your spectrum, the ground's going to be just as hot as what a human body is or anything else. So you're going to have a really tough time differentiating between that person and, just something that's at that same temperature on the ground. So a lot of times, too, you just want to use low lights. You're going to get better resolution with these low light setups. I've tested this one of an evening, and it can be to where I wouldn't be able to physically see Amy, my wife, very well, but I could fly this drone with a low light without any additional light, and it would look more like it was 2 hours before dark. I was in twilight. If you attach items like these loom cubes to it, you can go around with a low light camera at light, and every place that those illuminate, and they're extremely bright, it will literally look like daytime. There would be no issue at all flying at 100 to 125 feet and seeing a person on the ground or, an animal or anything else. So those are a really nice setup for a person that's looking to do something for search and rescue. I've also recently, I'm always searching the internet for articles where people are using these. I recently had read to where one of the states had been using a drone, and they actually had helped them capture a guy that was on a DUI, and he pulled the car over and he took off and ran. And when he took off, the officer happened to be the one that was pursuing, and another one that had a drone. They put it up in the air, and they had it up in the air. You can get these up in about 10 minutes time. And they had it up in the air, and they had the guy spot and found within 15 minutes. And they sent cars and had him cut off and had him. So there's a lot of good uses for these things. I would suggest that always look at, for me, if you're doing this as an entrepreneur or you're doing it as a business, we always have to look at the public safety. DJI and Unique both make hexacopters. I lean towards hexacopters for the standpoint of, if you have one of these fail for any reason at all, you can still bring this down to the ground safely without hurting anybody. And on a quadcopter, whenever you have one fail, it's down. That's just it. So the hexacopters are better for public safety. They're also better for your liability, as an individual using these. So I don't know for sure if insurance companies are giving a cut on it, but I would think that if you were using a hexacopter, they'd be looking at that. If not, I'd point it out to them. As far as cameras go, resolution, all of these things, people can get into these resolution analysis paralysis things. They do it on digital cameras. They do it on everything else. You're only going to fit so many megapixels on a screen. Mavic Pros, the older ones like what I've got, were like 12 megapixels. They've came out with new ones now that are 20. This one, I've got a camera that'll go on it that will have a 20 megapixel, and then they've got other ones that are down to 12. The reality is, guys, when you're looking at it on a computer screen, you're only going to see so many pixels. It's just, for me, I see a lot of that as a marketing ploy. If you're a digital photographer and you're looking to blow things up, or, you're big into the film industry, then yeah, I can see that. It can make a difference. But for public safety and law enforcement, as long as you can see very clearly and sharply what you're doing, that's really all you need for it. So good place to save a few bucks if you're doing it for that. The other thing to consider is your lens angle on them. A lot of people will purchase these, and depending on their use, they won't think about what the lens angle is on it. And if you, of course, got a wide angle lens, you're going to capture more area of what you want to see at a given altitude. But in some cases, depending on your use, you may want a tighter, focal length on your lens to where you don't care if you're seeing quite as broad of range. You want to see more clearly what you're searching for. You can spend a lot of money, and they do have them now that have zoom lenses, and the Mavic Pro has came out now, the smaller DJI drone with a lens that I don't want to say, the gentleman online may know, I can't remember what it was now, but it wasn't a huge amount of a telephoto on that one. It was, maybe something like from a wide angle to a 50 millimeter or something like that. They haven't really got these like digital cameras yet where you're zooming at 24x and 34x, things like that. But I can tell you, I know, at least for this brand, because I deal direct with them, that's coming in the future. They are working right now on coming out with a digital zoom camera that is going to give, and they're looking at it for law enforcement surveillance, because one of the issues with a fixed focal length lens for surveillance use is if you really want to see what's going on, you're going to have to fly down lower at certain cases. Well, it kind of gives away that you're trying to do surveillance undercover. If you've got this drone that's down there making a lot of noise. So once they get this zoom lens set up on there, and you get these things up to 250, 300 feet, really if there is any other noise in the area, you're not going to know that's up there, and you're not going to hear it unless you're looking for it. And they're going to be able to zoom in at that point, find, what they're looking for. They're also doing the same thing with thermal imaging. And the reason they're doing that is whenever they get in terrain that dictates they be a little closer to the ground where the resolution isn't quite as good on thermal imaging. They're getting them now. By next year, they're coming out with models of cameras that are going to be like anything else. They're going to be more and more affordable for people to get them higher resolution. And with that higher resolution, you're going to be able to fly higher. If you were, say, in the mountains of Branson or Tennessee, or you were, out doing search and rescue in the Rocky Mountains, you're going to be able to get that drone up higher and still pick up that thermal image that you're going to need to see to do your search and rescue. Cost range, I want to touch on that again. That's a really wide open thing, guys. You can go all the way from getting an older Mavic refurbished from DJI with a 12 megapixel camera that will fly great and do great for $800 and throw your iPhone or iPad on it, and you've got a really good working system. You can go into things like this unique with thermal cameras and another camera, and you can be in anywhere from $2,900 up to $5,000. You can be a film person that's getting into it, to some of the big hexacopters that are carrying digital SLRs, or people that are using them in agriculture for spraying. You can have a $50,000 device. So it's really going to depend on your purpose and what you're looking for out of it. The bottom line on these things are these save lives. It's already been proven by many law enforcement agencies and public use agencies. These are going to be a way to save a lot of people's lives that are inspectors, that are putting themselves out in danger, be it law enforcement or public works, working for cities, inspecting power lines, different areas during storms, search and rescue. It's a booming technology, and if you sat down and analyze it and look at it for your infrastructure, the things that you need to remember in your business is it's going to take time to implement it. You can't just go out and buy one of these and throw it in. It's not going to be accepted that way. You're going to need to sit down. You're going to need to do your risk analysis for whoever you're presenting this to. You're going to need to do a cost analysis for them. You're going to need to sit there and really think of all the ins and outs. What equipment do I really need, and what's going to be the purpose it's going to serve? And then be prepared to, present those facts. And once you put that together, I have failed myself to see any instance to where you can't show that these are going to be not only cost effective, but save people's lives in the process of doing so. So with that said, I'm going to turn this over to my beautiful wife, Amy, and let her take it from this point. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Oh, this way. Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about some of the FAA rules. That's my half of this presentation, this webinar. So you know, being that this is our business and what we do hear people talk to us about drones all the time. We hear a lot of stories. We hear a lot of crash stories. Actually, I think we heard one right before this class started. We heard a crash story. We hear a lot of stories of people flying out of visual line of sight, flying in restricted or prohibited airspace above 400 feet, spying and peeping or being nosy on neighbors or over fences. We hear stories of people flying over other people or animals or spooking animals and people flying at night. But I would have to say what we do hear most of the time is that people are not registering their UAS, or that they're a commercial pilot that is not licensed, or they have a UAS that is registered commercially and they are not a licensed pilot. So that's kind of where we're going to go with this for a little bit. We're just going to talk about some of the basic rules and regulations that the FAA has set forth. Know that the FAA is tasked with airspace safety and our safety, so the public on the ground, the public in the air, everyone, pilots, the whole community. So, and they take that job incredibly seriously. So as time has rolled on, they've had to make some rules and regulations regarding the use of UAS within the United States. So if you are the owner of a UAS weighing between 0.55 and 55 pounds, you must get it registered. You can go onto the FAA's website, it's faa.gov, and there's a little button, I think, on the very first page that opens up when you put in faa.gov, and it says drone, and if you click that, it'll take you to a registration screen. So there are two ways that you can register your UAS. And the first way, this is for knowledge based, just so you have an idea of where we're going with this, because as public safety officers, you will all be the second way, but I just want you to know about the first one. That is to register as a special rule for model aircraft, which is section 336. To be eligible to register underneath this special rule of the FAA, you have to be flying your drone for hobby and or recreational purposes only. That is only for the fun of it. And I will tell you that window that constitutes just for the fun of it is that big, and everything else falls into the commercial end of it. But if you manage to fit into this hobby and or recreational category, you'll register for $5 for 3 years, which is actually the same price for a commercial UAS. You have to mark your UAS with the registration number, which everyone's required to do that. And you have to follow the rules and regulations that the FAA has set forth, or follow community-based safety guidelines, such as with the national community-based organization, such as if you were part of a modeling club. If you register your UAS under this category, you do not need to be a licensed drone pilot. You can just go out and fly your drone for fun and just follow the rules, which are all listed on the FAA's website, although I'm going to go through them in a little bit down, a couple slides down, so you'll know those too. But there's no other requirements for you, just to go and just register your drone. So the second way to register, this is called the small UAS, or Part 107. Now, if you're registering your UAS under this section, you are either flying recreationally or commercially. All commercial use drones obviously will always fit into this category, and some of the recreationals will also fit into this category. So remember that part, the modelers, is a really small little window. If you are registering your drone under this registration system, you will need to get your remote pilot certification from the FAA, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. Your drone will weigh under 55 pounds. You will always fly it within line of sight. You will never fly near other aircraft or over people. You will never fly in controlled airspace near an airport without FAA permission, and you will only fly during the daylight or civil twilight at or below 400 feet. If you notice on this slide, on this PowerPoint, there are asterisks after a certain number of these. The reason they're there is because those are items that you can request a waiver or an authorization from the FAA to operate outside of those. I actually included a slide about waivers a little ways down, because as public safety officers, that actually pertains largely to you, since the chances of you operating during evening hours is probably pretty huge. I don't know, where you all are living, but around here we have a couple airports, so the chances of flying within 5 miles of an airport is also pretty large. So there are items that the FAA recognizes are, under certain circumstances, going to need to be, I hate to say violated, but they give permission for those if you need to get a waiver and authorization. So moving on, so more about the small UAS rule part 107. So if you have an aircraft and you are not registering under that recreational 336, you must register your drone under the Part 107. So it has to be registered one of the two ways. You can fly freely. We're going to take a pause for just a sec.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so whether you're commercial or recreational, you can fly freely in Class G airspace, fly at or under 100 miles an hour. You will always yield right of way to manned aircraft, never again fly over people, and never fly from a moving vehicle unless you are in a sparsely populated area. And again, all Part 107 pilots, so they must be certified. So they must have that Part 107 certification. Okay? So this isn't working, so I have to move the mouse onto the screen. Okay, got it. Okay, so what is considered commercial use of a UAS? If you are operating a drone or a UAS and you are paid money, product, services for any aspect of your operation, then you are considered a commercial use pilot. So if your job is public safety officer and your job is to go take photographs at a crash scene, that actually is a commercial use pilot. So even though you're not getting technically paid to fly a drone, it is part of your job that makes you a commercial pilot. The commercial pilot arena is pretty big. And so you could, like, other things that fall into that would be if you were a real estate agent and you had your own drone and you were flying, taking pictures of your own properties that you have listed, that actually still falls into commercial, even though nobody's hiring you. You're working for yourself. That's still commercial. Farmers utilizing UAS to watch their crops, that's all commercial. Even though they're not making money that day flying the UAS, eventually when their crops are sold, they'll bring in some money. So it is all considered commercial. So most UAS, the window for recreational, again, is pretty small, and so a lot of them fall into that commercial. My husband and I, we own Aerobotics. All our drones are all registered commercially because we're a business, so ours are all registered commercially, and we were both certified, FAA certified pilots. So again, let's roll on. Okay, so a little bit about what that certification is. So again, if you're registering your drone commercially, you have to get that Part 107 certification, also called an FAA Remote Pilot Certification. And what it is it's an FAA aeronautical standard remote pilots use to demonstrate their knowledge regarding a bunch of different aspects about their ability and understanding regarding safety, airspace, weather, emergency procedures, crew resource management, radio communications, physiological effects of drugs and alcohol, aeronautical decision-making and judgment, airport operations, UAS maintenance, and pre-flight inspections and procedures. So that might sound a little daunting to like read that, but it's not horrible. Oh, I'm not working again. Hang on. And okay, so it's definitely doable. It takes a lot of studying and it takes a lot of understanding concepts. And so, but anybody could do it. If you just need to like be diligent and understand the material, and you can go get your license. So in order to take that test, to be able to get your test, you have to be at least 16 years old. You have to be able to read, speak, and write and understand English. They do make special circumstances for like hearing impaired. You must be in a physical and mental condition to safely operate a UAS. You must pass, obviously, the aeronautical exam, which I'll give you a little clue on how that all works. And the only exemption to all of this is if someone already is a small private pilot or a commercial pilot, and they already have their pilot's license to operate like a regular manned aircraft. Those individuals can apply for the Part 107, and the FAA will, do a little background check on them and then probably just let them have their license. So, but that's the only exemption. Everyone else has to take the test. That private pilot's license or commercial pilot's license, the amount of knowledge you need for that kind of trumps the amount of knowledge you need to take this, so they understand that you know more, so they let you not have to actually take the test. Okay, so about the test. So the test is all multiple choice. It's question and 3 options. You get 3 options to choose from. They are all objective and they are all multiple choice. There are no short answers. There's no fill in the blanks, just multiple choice. Each question can be answered only by a single response, meaning that there isn't A and B, B and C. There's none of that. It's one answer is correct. So every time you get a question, each one of those answers is 33%. So one of them is the right one. So you just have to figure that out. So each test question is independent of the others. You'll never have a string of questions where you have to figure one question out in the beginning and then your subsequent questions all are hinged on that first one. You must pass the test with a 70 or better. The test is actually 60 questions, and you are allowed 2 hours to complete it. What the FAA has done is they have developed a large question pool. And so they have broken down the percentages of how many questions on your test will pertain to each different area. And so I could go take the test, and the very same day I could walk in with someone else, and our tests could be entirely different and not even share a question the same. So there is this huge pool of questions, and you could get, you never know what you're going to get. And so the best way to be successful is to understand the concepts and have all the information so that when you go to take it, you feel comfortable and confident. As long as you understand the principles, you understand how to read an aeronautical chart, you understand how to read METARs, you can go in and no matter what METAR they give you, you're good to go. The cost to take the test is $150 per attempt. If for some reason you should go in and not pass the exam the first time you take it, you have to wait 14 days before you're able to retest. So again, what it covers airspace. So the restricted airspaces that, B, C, D, all of that, the rules to be able to fly in it or not fly in it, aeronautical charts, how to read aeronautical charts. There's a lot of information on aeronautical charts, longitudes, latitudes, what classifications airports are. So you have to be able to read those. There's sections about weather, whether the temperature, dew point, understanding how thunderstorms work. You need to know all of this because as a pilot, you're going to have to make decisions every time before you put your UAS up in the air. If if it's a good idea or not to put it up. You will have questions about METARs and TAPs. METARs and TAPs are pretty much they're like weather code. I kind of look at them like a puzzle. I really enjoy reading them and figuring them out because I like puzzles. But it's a language all unto itself, and it's not impossible to learn. If someone explains it to you, you'd go, oh yeah, it's not that bad. You'll have questions about safety. You will have questions about FAA waivers, applying for waivers, what is waiverable, what is not, risk management and judgment, safety procedures. Like, for instance, when we put our UAS up in the air, we have a little checklist that we go through every time. We check and make sure our batteries are good. So there are systems that you follow before you put your UAS up in the air, and those fall under the safety procedures. Crew and public safety is also part of it. And then, of course, they want you to know the rules regarding your licensing and retesting. So what you're all licensed and retesting. I wanted to throw a little thing in here about waivers, just so as I throw that word out, and I want you guys to know what it means. So we had talked earlier about some of the things like, say, flying at night. You're not supposed to fly your UAS at night. I'm sure you'll see them, though, because we see them flying around. And in order to be able to fly your UAS at night, you do need to apply for a waiver. So they're out there, and as public safety officers, you guys are absolutely going to need some waivers. And what you're going to do, so I'll just tell you the difference between waivers and authorizations. Authorizations are a one-time event. You apply, it's an event, and when it's over, it's done. So maybe, say it was a wedding and you were going to photograph a wedding, you might apply for an authorization to put your UAS up in the air for this wedding at night, and then the next day you don't have it anymore. I'm sorry, those are authorizations, I mix those up. Waivers are permanent. So when you apply for a waiver, that lasts a lifetime. So authorizations are a one event, and waivers are forever. So what they are is their official permission to allow a Part 107 certified remote pilot. So only people with their actual remote pilot's license can apply for waivers and authorizations, but it allows you to operate outside some of the rules set forth by the FAA. You have to note that waivers and authorizations can take up to 90 days. They have a lot of the whole United States is all writing them, asking them for waivers and authorizations. So the process can take a little while, and sometimes, and the requirements are, you have to be able to prove that you'll be safe under the guidelines of the waiver that you're asking for. If they have questions, they won't give you the waiver. They'll make you correct whatever it is that they're looking for. Waivers and authorizations will only be granted if the UAS can be performed, operation can be performed safely and in a manner set forth in the waiver application. Okay, so the most common waivers requested are flying at night, flying over people or persons, flying from a moving vehicle or aircraft not in a sparsely populated area, flying multiple aircraft with only one pilot. You're only allowed to fly one at a time unless you get a waiver. Flying beyond the pilot's line of visual sight. You are always supposed to operate your UAS within the line of sight, and that only means like what your naked eye can see, or if you wear corrective lenses like glasses or contacts, you can use those, but it does not mean like first-person view goggles. So if you want to fly beyond what your naked eye can see, you need to have a waiver. Flying above 400 feet, flying near airports or in controlled airspace. Thankfully now, if you're going to fly within a controlled airspace, they do have this LANC, the Low Altitude Authorization and Notification capability. It is an app that we have on our phones, and you can apply for a waiver just for this, the flying near airports at low altitudes, and that makes it really fast. You can get an instant waiver on that, or an instant authorization on that. So that was pretty much all I had for you guys. I do want you to know that if you're thinking about putting up a UAS program within your public safety agency, it does take time. There's a lot of things to think about. As Rick was talking about, you need to make sure that you have your, rules set up, setups for how the procedures are going to, what procedures you're going to do, like make sure everybody's checking the weather before the UAS goes up, how you're going to record all the things that need to be recorded, like what date, what time you went up, how high you flew. But aside from all the procedures, like Rick said, they are an immense benefit to all public safety. So in 2 days, we are doing another webinar, and it is going to be just a webinar on the Part 107. And so if you're interested, you can zoom back in at that. Is that considered a location? A link. At that link that is up here on the screen. And then that one will also start at 6:30. And it's going to be more, like some of it you'll hear again, but it's going to be just about the Part 107 and what the rules are on operating your UAS. Just in general. So operating it in general. So I think now we're just going to open up, and if anybody has any questions, we would love to answer any questions that anyone has.
Let's see.
Last night around 10 o'clock inside and out. Also, your credit card.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Does anybody have any questions? I've got everybody unmuted. Anybody in the audience?
I've got a couple questions.
Sure, go ahead.
I really like to know about integrations with other systems. I know that you talked about the other people, other drones from different manufacturers. They're more proprietary on support, blocking them down whenever you're not allowed to or anything. What do you have as far as like integration with video management systems, license plate recognition systems, stuff like that? Or is all capable?
Right now, as far as recognition and license plates, I have
Can I hear
these systems that are these cameras that are doing facial recognition and that type of thing. The thing about a lot of these right now, it's in such a infancy that people are constantly dating, developing applications and apps. Right now, like we've got, as far as that type of recognition, I'm not certain. I can tell you, I've seen them come out with at least 5 or 6 new things they use in agriculture, and they're implementing it with agricultural software that they're using in departments. People on crop management, they can fly over and they can determine if they have an area that's like lacking on water or has pests or that. And they're putting it in their software and being able to model it out and send out their UAVs to spray these areas, that type of thing. As far as faces and things like that, I can't give a solid answer. But I will just guarantee it'll happen.
Yeah.
Because it's already happening on these other avenues, and it's just a matter of time. As I read what these things are changing every day. And like me sets on an Android platform, OS platform. So a lot of people develop apps close in that, and DJI software will run like an Android platform or on iOS. So everybody out there, guarantee you something to build your apps for this stuff. They get those areas. So did you have like a specific?
Well, my curiosity, we use generative recorders. It's a video management system. We've got several cameras on it. And I assume with the camera on this, if you're able to type in Android or iOS or anything like that it's got an interface with it. Right. And I would, just out of curiosity, curious on whether the camera itself could be brought into another video management system.
I'm certain.
If that's the case, license plate recognition, face recognition, it could be run on a secondary video management system. All this
Right.
If you do that, there wouldn't be a problem. I'm certain that you can link and set up your link. It's not like you're capturing anything in format that's unrecognizable. I mean, you can set this thing up, it's doing high definition video, and you can set up anywhere from 1080p and you're transmitting back to your device, which is either an iPad if you're using that, an iPhone, or an Android phone, or an Android crystal sky monitor. I have no doubt in my mind, it actually class right now, it's on Android that is teaching you to set up those kind of links. So where you can do data transfer between different types of applications. So I know if I'm taking a class on it, it's already out there, and it'll work. Because we do it every day. Anything that we take pictures on our phone, and we can sit there and we can Bluetooth into our computer. So I would think a relatively easy thing to do once the person has figured out what their structure is. DJI, I know, and you need both. Anybody that's in commercial market, they're putting all their software out the web. They're putting out these SDK software kits, and what that is software kit. And it's giving you access to API calls in their software. And if you have access to those API calls in the software, then what you can do is you can call for certain instances of their software to communicate with yours, or yours to communicate with theirs. So it's it's there. My guess is somebody's probably already done it, but if not, you get a really tech savvy guy that's still a little bit of development. And if your software, I'm a tech guy, I'm a retired IT leader. Are you? I programmed for Mercy for years, and I was an IT business analyst for Mercy and Cox on contract for years, and so I'm in the program. And in reality, if your software, whatever you're using, is using something like SQL database or anything like that, guaranteed that there's some way you can just download this into your SQL database, set up a field there, and access it very simple.
Cool. Do you have any other questions?
Got any questions?
You mentioned crashes. I assume that that's going to be more accidental than just, hey, watch me hold my beer, watch this. Out of curiosity, it's kind of a multi-part question. I assume some of these devices probably they already have sensors infrared. They've got other things. What about like distance sensors, angle velocity sensors, to help protect the pilot?
Whenever I'll teach fly these, and I've got a setup where I use Mavics for it because one, it's cost effective. Two, I can use two controllers, so I can set up not only in the software geofence, so I can set say a 100-foot radius circle, and then I can set an altitude of 75 feet, and I can say, okay, as long as I'm seeing, I'm getting GPS reading. That UAV is not going to go outside of those parameters that I set. But then I can not only do that, what I'll do is I'll slow down the responsiveness of all the controls inside. So that whenever somebody's not acclimated to how it works, just push all at once instead of just setting this thing down in the ground or off into space somewhere, it's going to react extremely slow. And then that way I can watch and I can give instruction until they get a feel for it. It's going to be just like you were walking instead of running. You're going to drift, you're going to move in your direction until you can get a feel for how controls are. So yes, to answer your question, you've got so many parameters. You can set distance, altitude, speed of controls. You can even change how the controls react. If you want to change how the right side stick operates versus the left, and you change any parameter on it. And then just, I was suggesting this is pick one way as once you learn and adapt and keep it that way. Because, I've done it myself, experimenting. I've changed things around just to see how it worked. And it was all right while I was playing around with it. The next thing I know, you kind of fall back in our old habits. And as I go down on land or do this or that, I roll it. Oh, what did I do? So you got just exercise caution generally.
That kind of leads into what about automation of the drones flying themselves before guard? large doors or anything of that nature?
You can do autonomous flight. You see those two little black spots on the front of that? Those are sensors.
Okay.
And what those do, theirs operates off of sound. So it's almost like a back. You know how they operate off sound and they avoid things at night based off the sound waves. They're putting out sound waves. And I can turn on obstacle avoidance. And if I fly that thing too close to a building, and within this one, it's about a 4 to 6 foot distance, it stops. If it's reading GPS, it stops. It sets off an automatic alarm and tells you, hey, it's not going any further. There's so many safeties you can actually set on these things to prevent, an accident. Now you have to check with the models because they'll have sensors and notifications. Some of them will only detect if you're moving forward. Some will detect forward and backward. They won't detect up and down. That you can literally in the software set these up for a 100% autonomous flight. So let's say if you're in law enforcement or a fire department or whatever you may be doing, search and rescue, it's not too big. Because like I said, you don't want to cover the same territory. So you can take your software and go out there and map out in the software several acres in a matter of minutes, hundreds of acres. Map it out, set your outside parameter on it. Tell this you want to fly at this particular altitude, and you want it to cover and take photographs of every square inch of that. And what it will, and then you can set a GPS takeoff point and tell it you want to mark that. And then you would sit there and say, whenever you're done, you want to turn home and set that thing off, and you'll watch that drone take off, fly. It will mark all of the points and fly a detected pattern throughout that property. It will make sure it's taking photographs of the correct overlap of angle. So then you can upload the software, stitch it together and have one huge image of what you were looking at, or convert that into a 3D image. You can even do up to 3D for buildings, terrain, anything you want to do. When it's done, it'll come back, it'll land at its home base and shut itself down. And what's really fascinating to me, they've got the software intelligent enough on these autonomous flights, because these things only fly 20 minutes, a throw. But whenever it senses it's about out of battery power and it gets down, you can set your percentages on it. So I want to return home because the distance at 20%. When it sees 20% battery power, it will mark its last spot. It took a photograph of. Then it will fly back and land, so you can do a hot swap of battery. If you tell it to take off, it will go back to that point, lift off and get it up and finish its mission. So the technology on these is just jumping by leaps and bounds. It's, what it do. Where before people were just trying to pull them around and take pictures. Now that they're really becoming commercial tools, there's really a lot of use.
That's awesome. I manage our security department. We call it public safety, but it's security department. And anyway, that'd be interesting. I might actually ask you a little bit about the difficulties in getting a waiver or something like that for dispatch purposes, because I would love to have these after hours patrolling parking lots. We actually work with Missouri State quite a bit in tandem with vehicle thefts, break-ins, and stuff like that, Springfield Police and everything. And I think that it would be very functional. I mean, we have 43 acres on main property. We've got several other buildings.
Right.
A lot of different buildings. In Springfield, we may not have an officer that will send one out. We will, they can only go out there a couple hours or, 10 minutes for one shift. But having something like that on the site where I could have a dispatcher controlling 3 or 4, or they're doing guard drones in there.
Right.
And, what would be the difficulty in having a dispatcher license to fly 4 or 5 drones if they're automatic?
So, well, that's a way. And so, the Olympics, did you see the beginning of the Olympics? That had, I forgot how many drones. I knew how many originally. It was a lot. But they had several pilots operating. So people were operating multiple. Of course, that wasn't here in the United States. And here you get one unless you apply for a waiver. I would say that you'd probably, you can apply. It does take a long time. And so you fill out the application and you send it to them, and you might not hear anything back for almost 3 months, and then they might write you back and they don't tell you exactly what it is you're missing. They kind of just, we're not, it's not enough, because they want to make sure things are safe. That whole like driving from a slow moving vehicle, that actually might pertain to you if you had, but that would be one person driving and one person operating a UAS around the parking lot, keeping it mostly within line of sight. It would have to stay within line of sight. We have a night waiver, and it took a while to get, and
I can tell you the big thing with waivers that I learned, the ones we apply for is they're worried about the risk management. That's going to be their big thing, is the public safety side and what you're doing to minimize the risk. And like Amy was saying, they won't, if you do something, fill something out, you don't answer it, they don't write back. They don't make it easy.
Yeah.
They don't say, okay, you didn't say this, tell us this. What they'll do is say, well, we see where you're lacking in your risk management area as far as public, that may wander into the area or something like that. And they want to know what you're doing to minimize the chance of any type of accident.
Right.
Night waivers, we managed to get that okay, but I had to jump a lot of people.
Yeah.
But there's kind of a learning process. Once you figure out what they're looking for, I will just about guarantee you sit down then and you'll know what kind of analysis work before you fill it out. You'll fill it out. But in your case, doing it for that, I would bet that if you sat down, we sat and talked about some of the things that you would have to risk doing that, you'd probably be able to fill something like that out in your area and get it. Because they're not there, and they made it clear to me, I talked to them. They're not there to they're really there just to make sure that you're really, really safe. Not hanging yourself out.
What did we end up doing? We had to have lights, and we had to have a dedicated visual observer when we're flying at night.
Right.
So that's like a spare person just watching the UAS, not the pilot.
Here was a big key that I found. This was one of the things that a lot of people wouldn't put in. And from the person I was talking to, all the different in the world was, I had to say we would not only watch visually at night, but we would listen. And the reason I had to do that was because just like, lifelines flying in altitude. So it's at night, you may not see it, but you can darn sure hear it coming. And I said, if I heard any audibly that I thought was general aviation aircraft or lifeline, helicopter, anything like that, I would immediately find a place to land and bring it down to the ground. So there's no chance of interference with that. So it's little things like that people don't think about.
Yeah.
And once they put it in,
The hexacopters help too.
hexacopters.
They help because,
Much more stable.
well, if one of the engines goes out, that can still be landed. If you're flying a quadcopter and one goes out, it's coming down. So, yeah, and that's what they worry about, it coming down. So they consider a person, this is a person, right? So they worry about that, and rightly so. People do get hurt.
I would think in your scenario that would be.
Well, I know it would be an additional investment to get involved in, but it really would free up a lot of manpower.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to.
I can imagine things from that perspective in the security. Think of the things a person can see from 100 or 200 feet that they, for a security guard that might not actually.
Right.
You might pick up that guy on the other side of the building that's going to take off whenever he sees headlights coming. Something fishy, sketches going on.
Right.
Well ahead of it.
That security is just deterrence as well.
That's right.
Hearing and seeing something like that.
That's right. I can almost report I walk around those things around the spotlights on the street.
Right.
Yeah, and those boom cubes, they are bright.
They're bright.
They're super bright.
That's gonna be another spot.
Yeah. So
Is that cool?
it's extremely cool. So maybe we'll see you guys on Thursday.
Do you have
Yeah.
any questions on anything?
Sick, Gary.
All right.
Gary, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Did you have any questions?
No, I got in late from work and everything, so I didn't get a chance to get it all, but I like listening to the last part that I did here.
Okay. All right. Well, I will send you the info on Thursday for the other part, and then we'll try to get the video uploaded maybe to YouTube or something, or make it shareable for everyone.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
If any of you guys ever have any questions, I don't know if Amy's got stuff.
I do. I have.
Yeah, she can give you some cards. Just call us, because it's not, we love this stuff. We'll learn. I would. You ever need help with that, you will implement that, let me know. I'd love to help out. Because those